Leif went ashore under guard while the other 8 of us remained tied beyond Gullhaven's quarantine stones, close enough to smell well water and too far away to drink it. The harbor boat carried him between pale rocks. 2 spearmen sat facing him. Earl Sten's bronze seal rested in his bound-looking hands, though they had not tied him. That was law's first cleverness. Make a man feel free, while every point tells him where freedom ends. Leif kept his back straight until the boat touched the quay. Then he looked once toward us. I raised an empty cup. He nodded and climbed. Vera had divided the mercy skin into 8 wet mouths, and 1 swallow saved for Leif. What remained in our own stores would not carry 9 people through another full day of labor. 2 sound barrels had become 1 sound barrel, and 1 that tasted of tar after its emergency patch. 8 skins had dwindled to damp leather. The half skin went to Colin for washing Orm's scalp. Bera scratched the change on her board, then turned it face down because nobody needed numbers staring while the well shone on shore. The work before us was plain enough to hurt. We had to clear Hroalds' ship of death taint, settle who owned her without opening one another, pay for repairs, and put food and water aboard. If any part failed, the ship remained a floating prison. Thor could split the quarantine post. He could not make frightened people drink from a cup we touched. He could not turn Sten's seal into my claim, or my knife into a witness. Harbor law was a wall strength would only thicken. The saga opened where the ice fight had left it. Saga level 2, with toughness chosen first and speed second. Renown stood at 0 of 12 toward level 3. Thor favor was 3 and Odin favor 1. Storm strength and rune sight occupied my 2 gift slots, with narrow focus already part of Odin's gift. I had no safe reason to swap, no third slot, and no power that could rewrite a harbor roll. I said that aloud before anger found a better voice. Astrid stood with her split shield on her back and her wounded right arm close against her ribs. Bjarni watched Leif vanish into the lore shed. Orm held his spear too tightly. Ingrid and Nijal kept points down. Colin cleaned the mercy skin as if cleanliness itself might persuade the key. Bera looked ready to conquer the wells with a ladle. No threats, I said. No crossing the stones. If they send a tester, we obey unless the test kills us. Leif speaks first because the seal opened the hearing. We give him the chance he earned at the steering oar. And if he claims every plank for Sten, Orm asked. Then we answer with witnesses, not thunder. Bjarni flexed the 3 fingers left on his maimed hand. Salvage belongs to hands that save it, but family claims captured goods under voyage bargains. Gullhaven will smell silver in the gap. Good, Astrid said. A harbor that smells silver may forget to smell ghosts. A bell struck above the quay. The blue-cloaked Reeve climbed onto the law rock with Leif beside her. She was broad-faced, grey at one temple, and held her staff like a steering oar. Her name, shouted by a clerk, was Ragnhild Torvaldsdottir. She named 3 questions in order: whether the vessel carried living sickness, whether dead power clung to its timbers, and whether any lawful person could pledge payment for cleansing and repairs. Only after those would Gullhaven hear ownership. Leif lifted the seal. My father's house pledges for water and hearing, not for surrender of every claim. Good. He had found a narrow plank. The tide fell. Barnacles appeared on the quarantine rocks like old teeth. Ingrid measured the shrinking water with her spear shaft while Enjal watched harbor bows. Each hand wanted to do something large. We made them do small things instead. Tighten line, shade the wounded, wet cloth from the mercy skin without swallowing, and speak each change before fear enlarged it. Colin checked us. He touched throats, watched eyes, smelled bandages, and listened to lungs. Harbor people saw the examination. When he reached Bera, she ordered him to check himself first. He obeyed, then let her inspect his frostbitten fingers. Their little argument gave the key a picture no plague tale offered, living people caring badly and stubbornly for one another. Leif crossed the quay. The guards kept 1 spear before and 1 behind. He did not know Gullhaven law as well as he had pretended on the ship, but he knew how to ask where ignorance would cost us. At the foot of the law rock he bowed to office, not person. Ragnhild noticed. So did I. The falling tide gave our patience teeth. The bow line led down toward the nearest pale rock, and every handspan of water lost pulled the patched strake closer to barnacles. Bjarni made Ingrid ease the stern while he took in at the bow. She moved too quickly. The hull swung, and Torfi's promised weak seam gave a wet knock against stone. "Again!" Bjarni said. "We have 1 hull!" Ingrid answered. Then learn on the mistake before it asks for a second. They reversed the change by inches. Njal called distance from the rail. Orm lay flat with a wrapped pole between oak and rock, though the pressure reopened his scalp and red drops spotted the pale stone. Colin reached for the watercloth. Bera caught his wrist. Shade first. Wet only if the bleeding will not stop. Orm heard her and said, I always wanted my head valued below a cup. Your head can complain, water cannot. On shore, people watched us choose between pain and thirst. A woman carrying 2 full buckets stopped. She set one down beyond the guard line and argued with a spearman until Ragnhild turned from Leif's testimony. I could not hear every word, only the woman pointing at our empty cask and the guard pointing at Hroalds' prow. Leif did not use the quarrel to demand entry. He asked that sealed skins be floated out one at a time, drunk before witnesses, and burned if any of us showed sickness. Ragnhild made him state who paid. My house pays for the skins, he said. If the hearing rejects my claim, charge the silver before you return it. That was not surrender. It was risk placed where the law could see it. The bucket woman spat near the guard's boot. A little later, blue wax appeared on 9 stoppers. Ragnhild sent 1 skin across the stones for each living person, sealed with blue wax, and demanded we drink under watch. It was not generosity. Sick throats, black cough, or blood in the mouth would show. I drank slowly enough to taste wood smoke in the water. Around me, 8 people did the same. No one coughed black. No one died. The harbor crowd remained afraid, but fear had lost 1 tooth. The second tooth was death taint, and that one belonged to Hroald still. 3 examiners came in a flat workboat, Ragnhild's keykeeper Asa, the thin cross-priest brother Serdik, and an old shipwright called Torfi Ash Nose. They wore waxed aprons and carried no heroic weapons. Asa had iron tongs, Serdik a little bell and vinegar cloth, Torfi an awl, mallet, and the expression of a man expecting oak to lie. Astrid ordered every weapon stacked at the mast. She did it before Shaw asked. Ingrid watched the pile. That distinction mattered. We were cooperating, not surrendering our lives to a crowd that still feared us. The examiners boarded one at a time. Torfi tested the rail, mast step, bilge, waterline seam, cracked steering grip, yard patch, and forward ribs. Every strike of his mallet found a different complaint. He named 2 sprung strakes, 4 bad scarf joints, 7 oarlocks needing pins, a rail section to replace, sail seams to replace, and rot beneath the place where Harold's throne bench had stood. Magical preservation had kept much of the hull hard, but where it failed suddenly. A living crew could sail the ship after 3 days' work if weather stayed kind. A rich fool could make her pretty in 10. We were not rich and the sea was not kind. Serdik found no fever in us and no ordinary corpse hidden below. Asa found black wax in plank seams, hair tied under 3 benches, and 9 little copper hooks driven where bilge water passed. Those were visible things. Their meaning remained uncertain until Orm saw one and went white. Hroald hung the drowned from hooks like those, he said. The cold moved when water touched them. Asa held the hook in tongs. Then we remove all we can see, scrape every black seam, wash with hot brine and vinegar, smoke the enclosed spaces, and burn the waste beyond the tide. The old rule calls that a death taint burning. It proves effort and public witness. It does not prove every god satisfied. Honest law, I said. She looked at me. Law that promises gods would be fraud. I liked her at once. There was 1 cluster beneath the forward floor that ordinary lamplight could not separate from tar stains. I could see the planks, the wet seam, and 3 scratched marks where a tool had entered. Rune sight was equipped. I used narrow focus on that visible seam alone. Blue edges rose around what my eyes already faced. 1 copper hook shone under a thin false cap of pitch. A black cord ran from it through 2 visible drill holes toward the prow. I saw no hidden enemy, no thought, no history. I saw an enchantment line because the wet wood and open floor lay before me. The gift offered to widen along every seam in the hull. I refused and held 1 hook until Ossa's tongs found it. The price took a memory anyway. When I was 12, my father had laughed after my first weighted line struck a bobbing seal marker. I remembered his shoulders shaking and knew joy had stood there. The sound vanished. I could still see his open mouth. I could no longer hear the laugh. Odin had bought another small piece of home with knowledge I needed to keep strangers alive. I shut the sight and vomited a little water between my boots. Thor's old strain had not fully left me. Rune's sight added a knife behind the eyes. Serdic crossed himself. Asa only marked the hook's place with chalk. Useful? Astrid asked. Visible hook under visible pitch. Nothing more. It cost my father's laugh. Her left hand closed around mine once hard. Then she released it because pity in front of a watching harbor can become another chain. Ragnhild heard the examiners from shore. Her judgment was provisional. Gullhaven would lend cleansing troughs, firewood, vinegar, brine, 2 carpenters, and guarded access to water. Payment would be held against Sten's 2 silver arm rings until ownership was settled. Nobody crossed freely. Nobody claimed the ship yet. If we removed and burned the taint under witness, the plague-dead mark could be struck from the harbor roll. Torfi made us lift floorboards. Rot smell rose beneath them, mixed with vinegar and old salt. Bjarni named every patch we had made under ice and did not hide the worst seam. A liar might have won a cheaper bill and a shorter life. Torfi rewarded honesty only by grunting less. Asa separated evidence. Ordinary dirt went in one basket, suspicious bindings in another, and confirmed taint work onto a marked hide. She would not let frightened onlookers call every black fiber cursed. That patience kept Bera's old cooking cord from becoming proof against us. Serdic asked Colin. The two spoke quietly in the foreign tongue. Then Colin translated each question for us. No fever dreams, no black cough, no bites from living rats. Hroalds' dead magic remained a separate matter. The priest accepted the distinction instead of claiming all evil for his own explanations. The cleansing nearly harmed us before it helped. Bera poured vinegar into hot brine, and a white breath rolled through the open bilge. Colin coughed once, then heard Orm wheeze behind him. He ordered everyone with chest wounds upwind. Torfi objected that warm seams had to be scraped at once. Colin planted himself on the floorboard. You can scrape after they breathe. Torfi looked ready to lift him by the belt. Then Serdic's eyes watered so badly he walked into the mast. Work stopped. A quiet young carpenter on Torfi's crew pulled the trough toward the scupper with a hooked stave. Torfi called him Tovi Oak, knee, and cursed him for moving a master's equipment. Tovi answered, A trough can bear your anger, their lungs cannot. The name suited the way he knelt over timber, broad knee fixed against a board while both hands tested the grain. He opened air channels under the benches and showed us how to keep hot wash moving instead of letting fumes pool. Dalla Merk, a Gullhaven iron trader who interpreted cave marks for Asa, came to the quarantine edge carrying a slate. She had pale eyes, a copper ring through one ear, and no patience for men who called every dart cord Merk work. The first hair knot was harbor horsehair. The second held human hair and black wax. The third used green cave moss but carried Hroalds' hook twist, not a trade knot she recognized. Right uncertainty, she told Asa. If you call the wrong craft cursed, your next honest seller will keep quiet. We found a false pitch cap by tapping rather than sight. Tovi heard the hollow note. Asa peeled it. 2 hooks sat beneath, joined by waxed hair. One snapped under the tongs and flicked black wash toward Colin's face. Tovi knocked him aside with the trough stave. The drop struck Serdic's bell and raised frost around its rim. Asa buried bell and tongs in hot sand until the cold died. After that, shields went between scraper and seam, and nobody put a face over opened work. Leif agreed to pledge 1 arm ring. He kept the second in the seal chest. It was his family silver, and he had just spent part of it so 8 people could drink. I made sure everyone heard that. The ownership hearing began while smoke rose from our first cleansing fire. Gullhaven did not have one rule for a ship taken from an undead king on a cursed island. Anyone claiming otherwise would have been selling confidence by the cup. Ragnhild built a judgment from 3 old customs and made each speaker name what could be witnessed. First came family claim. Earl Sten had hired the voyage, supplied the lost ship, promised shares, and carried harbor bargains. Leif held his seal and blood right to speak for the absent house. That did not prove Sten lived or died. It did prove his household had invested silver and had debts attached to the voyage. Second came salvage. Bjarni described how Hroalds' ship had been freed, launched, steered, patched, rowed, and carried through ice by living hands. Astrid named the people who fought aboard it. I told how Hroald fell, but I did not turn his death into sole ownership. A knife stroke can end a king, it cannot row a longship with one hand. Third came crew share. Earl Sten had promised his raiders shares of gain. The original bargain had not imagined half the crew dead, the Earl missing, or a captured ship becoming the only gain. Ragnhild said, "A promise does not vanish merely because events become inconvenient." She also said, "Dead men's heirs might later bring claims, so a reserve must remain rather than letting survivors swallow every absent name." Leif's face tightened at each limit. Mine did too, for different reasons. If the family claim took all, we became guests on Sten's deck. If salvage took all, Leif's pledge and his father's investment became nothing. If current crew shares took all, the dead and absent were robbed by those lucky enough to reach a law rock. "What does Gullhaven take?" Vera called from beyond the stones. Ragnhild almost smiled. "Fees. We are not saints." That answer helped more than holiness would have. The Reeve proposed a witnessed division of 100 ship shares. 25 shares to Sten's family claim, controlled by Leif, until Sten's fate was known. 30 shares for salvage, divided among the 9 living people who launched and preserved the ship according to testified labor and danger. 30 shares as crew shares among those same 9, because they were the surviving company under the voyage bargain. 10 shares held in trust for proven heirs or returned survivors of Sten's lost crew. 5 shares reserved to pay harbor cleansing, immediate repairs, and provisions beyond the pledged ring. Any debt larger than that required the living share majority defined at the final tablet hearing. The numbers did not sing. They held knives apart. I received no extra ownership for carrying 2 gods. Astrid received no less because she was a hired shield. Colin received shares despite not standing in the first battle line because his treatment, counting, and courage had kept the crew alive. Bera's store's work counted. Leif received his family block and his own earned salvage and crew portions. The exact personal division went onto a wax tablet to be copied after testimony, with Bjarni, Asa, and 2 harbor fishers as witnesses. Leif asked for time. Ragnhild gave him until sunset, which was not much. The armoring already softened in a scalesman's hand. Carpenters waited for assurance of pay. Bera's water count waited for no law at all. I could have challenged Leif before everyone. Instead, I asked to speak with him on the quarantine stone path, guards at both ends. He came with the seal under his cloak, and anger held carefully behind his teeth. "They cut my father's ship into marks," he said. "It was never his ship. His ship broke. His voyage found this one. Our dead found it too. So did your chain wound." He looked toward Hroalds' hull. "If I accept, men will say I gave away inheritance. If you refuse, 8 people thirst while carpenters go home. Men will say that too." I did not tell him blood right was foolish. His family had risked silver. His father might be alive. Fair law had to survive claims I disliked, or it was only my appetite wearing a cloak. Leif stared a long while at the deck where Bjarni was prying up a tainted plank. Then he said, "The family block keeps Sten's dignity." "Yes. And I hold it without commanding every crew share." "Yes. You planned that answer too quickly. I have been thirsty long enough to become wise. It will pass." He laughed once, a cracked young sound. Then he returned to the law rock and accepted the division, provided every person could sell or keep a personal share freely, and no share meant ownership of a person's service. Witnesses spoke by task. Ingrid described the rise and hull defense. Enjal described rig and steering lines. Colin described who remained conscious enough to consent after Hroald. Bera described stores taken from wreck and ship. Their testimony turned glory into labor, which was closer to truth. The absent dead remained. We named Ketil Broad, Back Hakon, and every lost person whose name survivors knew. A clerk left blank marks for names still uncertain. 10 trust shares could never repay them. They did prevent us from declaring absence the same as permission. No one liked the arithmetic. That was almost proof it had weight. Leif gave up sole command. I gave up conquest claim. Gullhaven accepted delayed fees. The crew accepted a reserve for people not present to argue. Fairness did not leave everyone happy. It left everyone able to remain without reaching for iron. The hearing sharpened when a harbor net owner named Halla asked whether labor done by a cook counted like a spear cast. 3 men laughed. Bera climbed into the examiner's boat with her tally board and made them regret having mouths. She named every ration that kept a fighter standing, every patch cloth cut from stores, and every time hot brine had served hull before belly. Then she handed the board to Colin. "Read the marks if you think soup rose itself," Colin read. Halla withdrew the question. One laughing man did not, so Bjarni asked him how many strokes a dead oarsman pulled. Injal's claim caused harder trouble. He had not launched from Hroalds' deck, yet his rig work from the wreck rise onward had kept the mast and sail alive. Asa first placed him outside salvage. Enjal did not shout. He laid out his cut sling cords, the brace burn on his palm, and the line knot he had held while the ice spear crossed. Leif examined the knot and said the work belonged in the record. That cost the largest salvage holders 1 share each when the division was corrected. I disliked losing the mark for half a breath. Then I saw Enjal waiting without begging and disliked myself more. The trust reserve drew relatives from the crowd. 2 claimed cousins on Sten's voyage. Neither knew which ship their men boarded. Ragnhild refused both immediate shares but took names, home shores, and witness contacts. A blank was not a prize for the quickest liar. Leif added 1 safeguard of his own. If Sten returned, the family block did not swallow shares already earned, and Sten could challenge the judgment only before a public law rock. He will hate that, Leif said. Would he reject it? I asked. The boy looked at his father's seal. He taught me unwitnessed bargains are how thieves dress. Let him wear his own lesson. Ragnhild struck her staff. The first dispute ended without blood. Astrid waited until the ownership marks were witnessed, then made a claim nobody had prepared. She climbed into the harbor boat with her shield, left her spear aboard, and went to the law rock under her own name. I thought she meant to argue the fighter's salvage portions. She did that in 6 sentences. Then she asked Asa for a fresh tablet. I am forming a shield company, she said. Contracted service. No inherited command over its members. No lord may sell the company with land, ship, marriage, or debt. The key quieted. Even carpenters stopped pretending not to listen. Astrid named herself captain only until the company held its first sure vote after 30 days of service. Members could leave at a safe harbor after debts and current watch were accounted. Plunder, hire, injury payment, and burial costs would be divided by written marks. A member could refuse an unlawful attack on non-combatants without forfeiting earned pay. Ship command in navigation remained separate from fighter command in battle. The company would contract with the owners of Hroalds' ship for 1 voyage at a time. She had built the bones of it during night watches, while I was busy feeling important about keeping thunder in my ribs. Ingrid stepped forward first. I join if my salvage share stays mine. It does, Astrid said. Niall joined with a clause that sling stones and cord came from common equipment, since he had spent his own. Orm hesitated. He wanted the standing of a spear carrier, and feared being thought weak because of his burned scalp. Astrid did not coax him. Read it when your head is cooler, she said. A willing name means more tomorrow than a grateful name today. That was why he joined an hour later. Bera declined. I command stores already and will not ask shield fools whether barley is brave. Colin declined because he wanted healers' terms, not fighters' terms. Bjarni said his company was the hull. Leif watched the independent contract take shape beside his family claim. Pain crossed his face, followed by thought. My father hired shields by the season, he said. Your father is not signing, Astrid answered. No, I am asking the rate. They bargained. Not warmly, not cruelly. Astrid demanded 4 common shares of future prize for the company, plus individual ship shares already recognized, injury silver before celebration silver, and command over formation. Leif demanded obedience to retreat calls from the steering command when ship survival required it. Bjarni demanded fighters help bail when the hull was losing. Bera demanded everyone eat the ration given. I demanded nothing because Astrid's company was not mine. She looked at me anyway. You may contract our service with your personal shares if the owners vote you voyage leader. You may not assume it because I saved you twice. 3 times, I said. The third was an accident. A beautiful accident. Ragnhild coughed into her hand to hide amusement. Astrid did not hide hers. The contract was witnessed before sunset. Astrid, Ingrid, Angel, and Orm as founding shield hands. Colin attached as an independent healer paid from common voyage stores but free to depart. Vera keeper of stores, Bjarni boatswain, Leif, steering master and family claimant. My role remained unsettled until the shareholders voted after cleansing. That bothered me less than it once would have. A title taken before people can refuse is just a quieter chain. Work resumed. We carried tainted scraps with tongs into an iron trough on a sandspit beyond the wells. Harbor hands stayed upwind. Every black cord, copper hook, hair knot, rotten throne plank, and eye-scratched shield went into the fire after Asa marked it. The Nidhogg prow did not, Torfi said, cutting it away immediately would weaken the forward scarf. Orm stared at its carved scales as smoke moved across them and said the grooves were not decorative. Before he could explain, a stone clicked against the outer hull below the waterline. Astrid chose her witnesses. Not me. She chose Asa for law, Ingrid for the company, and a harbour widow who had once hired guards. The widow asked what happened when a captain became reckless. Astrid added removal by 3 of 4 founding voices until membership grew. She looked at me while saying reckless and enjoyed herself. Orm took the tablet. He could read only a few marks, so Dalla sounded every clause for him. Orm asked twice about injury silver and once about burial. He did not ask whether fear disqualified him. Astrid never suggested it did. Leif learned a boundary. He could hire a company, but not inherit its obedience. The idea offended something trained into him and relieved something younger. When he negotiated retreat authority, he argued from ship danger rather than birth. Astrid accepted the reason and rejected the blood claim. The removal clause received its first wound before the wax cooled. Ingrid asked what happened when a captain ordered pursuit off the ship and called it defense. Astrid answered that 3 of 4 founders could remove her. Orm frowned. If one is senseless and one is the captain, 2 voices decide. Then 2 living voices must stop a fool, Astrid said. The harbour widow shook her head. Or 2 rivals steal a company while blood is up. They argued until the tide turned. The final wording allowed an immediate refusal of a single order when 2 founding hands named danger aloud. Removal itself waited until all living founders who could understand were heard, with 3 assenting while there were 4. If wounds left fewer than 3 competent founders, the company suspended pursuit and protected ship, wounded and retreat until a shore hearing. It was clumsy. Clumsy law sometimes means people have found the sharp parts. Dalla sounded the clauses for Orm herself, not through an unnamed apprentice. She introduced herself as a free iron trader and harbour interpreter before taking his mark. When Orm asked whether her voice made her a witness, she said, "My voice carries your words. It does not become your consent. You press only after you can tell me what I said." She deliberately mistranslated one harmless phrase about burial cloth. Orm caught it because Astrid had read the clause earlier. Dalla nodded and restored the words. "Now I know you listened." Leif and Astrid then fought over retreat. He wanted steering command to order fighters off any threatened rail. She asked whether a frightened steersman could empty the prow to protect his own skin. He reddened, but he did not reach for the seal. They settled on visible danger to hull, steering, mast, or grounded escape, named aloud so Bjarni could challenge it. Navigation could demand retreat from a place. It could not choose how Astrid formed her people while leaving. Then another answered from beneath the quay. Merkin were watching the prow. We saw the watchers only because they made mistakes. A god was not needed to find. Wet black grit marked the quay ladder above the tide. A rope fiber, dyed green with cave moss, caught on a barnacle. Colin found a narrow footprint inside a fish shed where no harbour child had gone barefoot in winter. Ragnhild's guards blamed merc thieves at once. I did not. A footprint proved a foot. Green cord proved cord. Race did not prove guilt, and fear had already shown how quickly symbols outran truth. Gullhaven traded with merc settlements in summer. They were short, broad-jointed people from basalt tunnels and sea caves north of the harbour, pale-eyed from generations under stone. Some crews bought their iron, some cheated them. One faction served Skadi's chain buyers. Another had warned Gullhaven of rockfalls the previous spring. Ragnhild named all this publicly before ordering guards doubled. Good law again, specific danger, no broad blame. We had more immediate work. Torfi would not let us fight aboard a hull whose rail could be kicked loose. He set braces. Bjarni drove pins with his maimed hand and made me hold each piece where the mallet could threaten my thumb. Bera supervised water. Astrid drilled her new company on the sandspit after the taint fire cooled. I practiced throwing. That was not a divine revelation. It was the work I had done since boyhood, now forced into shipboard shape. Enjal hung a weighted sack from the yard and made it swing across the repaired rail. I used a plain ash spear first. The deck rolled under harbour swell. The target passed behind ropes, shields, and friendly shoulders. A hard throw meant nothing if it crossed Colin's back. My first cast struck low, the second clipped a stay. The third would have killed Bera's pot if she had not moved it and threatened me with burial in the bilge. Anjal shortened my grip. Astrid made Ingrid shove my shoulder during the draw. Bjarni ordered me to throw after 3 turns at a pump, so breath and balance were wrong. We added the 3-arrow-weighted cord I had used against Hroald and the Frost Scout. I tied its center around the spear shaft below the head. The weight altered the cast. Released too early, it dragged the point down. Too late, it wrapped my wrist. Practice found a middle moment, one circle to feel weight, one step with the deck, release when target crossed the mast line. No rune showed that, no thunder aimed it. The saga stirred after the 12th clean cast. Compatible practice technique demonstrated, spear cast and weighted line cast under moving footing. Thor refinement available upon aligned need, hammer cast. Cost to unlock, 2 Thor favor. Effect: 1 storm strength burst may be transferred through a practiced thrown weapon. The throw uses Eirik's own aim, timing, footing, and compatible technique. It does not correct a bad release, turn corners, distinguish friend from foe, or return the weapon. Physical cost equals a hard storm strength activation concentrated through back, shoulder, heart, and casting arm. 1 burst. Repeated use risks collapse. I did not spend favor. Not yet. 3 Thor favor remained banked. Odin favor remained 1. Rune sight and storm strength still filled the only 2 gift slots. Hammercast was a refinement of the equipped Thor gift, not a third gift and not a replacement. It had become available because practiced work gave power somewhere lawful to travel. "You have the face," Astrid said. "Which face?" Astrid said. "Which face?" "The one that believes a new way to injure yourself is progress." I told her the exact offer and cost. She made me repeat the part about no divine aim where her company could hear. At dusk, we finished the first repair list. 2 strakes were clamped and pegged. 4 scarf joints were opened, cleaned, and wedged. 5 of 7 oarlocks had new pins, 2 weighted on iron. The rail was braced but not finished. Sail seams remained. The steering grip held under Torfi's weight. We had used most of the pledged ring's value already. Then Ragnhild's west watch disappeared. Ingjal marked a safe lane. He chalked 2 lines on deck beyond which I could not release. Colin and Bera crossed unpredictably between them carrying empty buckets. I had to lower the spear 3 times. Ingjal praised those withheld throws more than the clean hits. My shoulder remembered ice. The old strain made the draw tremble. Speed helped my feet settle but did not steady fingers by command. I shortened range, rebuilt motion, and stopped whenever pain changed from work to warning. That restraint felt less heroic than climbing frozen rig and was probably wiser. Astrid tested the rule. She handed me an axe and asked whether Hammercast would use it. The saga gave no assurance because I lacked practiced throwing technique with that balance. Then she offered a carpenter's adze. Same answer. Compatible equipment was a boundary, not decoration. Ingjal refused to countercast clean merely because it struck. He chalked a small cross where my point landed and a second where Colin's shoulder had been when I began the turn. If those marks shared a line, the cast failed even if the sack split. I failed 7 that way. On the 8th, I stopped with the cord already moving. The weight wrapped my forearm and tore skin. Bera laughed until she saw blood, then laughed more quietly while Colin cleaned it. Withdrawing force after the swing began proved harder than releasing. Astrid made that the center of the drill. She placed shields at odd angles. Ingrid crossed the deck on Engjal's whistle. Orm rolled an empty cask through my feet. Bjarni sent me to the pump until my breath shortened, then ordered a throw before I felt ready. The spear went over the target and clattered into the water. "There goes 2 days of a carpenter's wage," Bera said. A widowed cordmaker named Solveig Rope Hand caught the recovery line from the quay. She had come to splice the yardstays and watched me coil the weighted cord badly. Without asking, she took it, laid 3 loops on deck, and made me pull them out under tension. The first snarled around my ankle. The second caught a pin. The third ran clean. "Throwers love the part where the thing leaves," she said. "Rope remembers everything before that." She changed 1 hitch below the spearhead, so the cord shed without biting the shaft. My next cast flew straight, but a harbor boy chasing a shaving appeared beyond the target. I held, took the swinging weight against my hip, and went down hard. The boy never noticed. Jarl marked that attempt clean. When Astrid handed me the adze, I tried 2 gentle balances and felt the head pull sideways. I put it down. No glow, no secret correction, only a tool I had no right to turn into thunder. Tovi thanked me with the solemnity of a man whose favorite adze had nearly joined a god's bad idea. His spear remained against the bell post, green cord lay cut beside it. Blood led toward the water, and the Nidhob prow had 3 fresh chalk marks on its lowest carved scale. Someone was no longer watching. Someone was measuring how to board. Night did not pause the hearing. It sharpened every argument. Ragnhild wanted the ship moved to an isolated mud berth after cleansing, farther from wells and closer to a guard tower. Torfi refused because the tide would ground the new straight clamps crooked. Bjarni refused because towing with 8 exhausted hands and a half-repaired steering grip invited wreck. Leif refused because moving before the plague dead mark was struck might be called entry without judgment. 3 sensible refusals made 1 dangerous stillness. Astrid solved her part without asking me. She contracted her company to Gullhaven for the night. 4 shield hands guarding the quarantine line and ship, paid in repair iron and 2 sacks of barley if attacked. The contract named hostile boarding, not every merc person. Ragnhild accepted. Ingrid took prow watch, Njal the mast, Orm the stern shadows, Astrid the key lime. Harbor guards held shore. Bjarni kept repair hands near tools that could become weapons. Colin laid bandages. Bera moved the remaining clean water under the mast where 1 spilled barrel could not end us. The ownership tablet returned with personal shares. The 30 salvage shares were divided by witness contribution. 5 each to Astrid, Bjarni, and me. 4 each to Leif and Bera. 3 to Orm, 2 each to Colin and Ingrid. None to Njal from Island Launch because he had joined from the wreck rise too late for that act. But his labor was recognized elsewhere. Ragnhild caught the omission before it became insult and revised testimony. IL had preserved rig and crew from the wreck rise onward, so 1 share moved from each of the 3 largest awards into a common survivor adjustment. Final salvage became 4 each to Astrid, Bjarni, and me. 4 to Leif, 4 to Bera, 3 to Orm, 3 to Ial, 3 to Ial, 3 to Ial, 2 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 Ingrid. 30, exactly. The 30 crew shares divided equally could not make whole marks among 9, so each received 3 shares, and the remaining 3 became a common crew fund controlled by majority vote. That fund would buy sailcloth and healer goods, not private drink. The family held 25. 10 remained in absent air trust. 5 paid harbor costs. Nobody owned a person's labor. Every mark could be transferred only before witnesses while debt was disclosed. Leif accepted the corrected tablet. So did the rest of us. The structure mattered more than whether my pile was largest. It was not. The bill followed. Cleansing wood, vinegar, brine, tongs, labor, quarantine guard, Torfi's carpenters, oak, iron pins, wool, tar, sail thread, water, food, and harbor fee. 1 armoring covered cleansing and most repairs. The 5 cost shares covered the rest of immediate hull work. Provisions required purchase after the living owners voted. Leif offered the second ring as a loan against the family block. Bera objected to debt terms. They settled on a fixed repayment from the first lawful prize or freight hire, no interest until spring, witnessed by Asa. If the voyage earned nothing, the family block lost 5 shares to common ownership rather than any person entering service bondage. That clause changed Leif. He heard how easily debt could become ownership of people and stepped away from it. We voted him steering master. Bjarni remained boatswain. Bera held stores. Astrid held contracted fighters. Colin held healer's authority over who was fit for watch. The owners voted me voyage leader through the next safe harbor, removable after an emergency by the defined 43-share majority, while the eligible estate remained 85. Leif voted yes last. Do not enjoy it, he said. Too late. Then enjoy the removal clause too. I did. Near midnight, the cleansing fire burned its final load. Asa held the last copper hook over the flame. Serdik rang his bell. Orm watched black soot creep along grooves in the retained prow. 10 lines appeared under heat, each running from the dragon's carved mouth toward a different scale. He whispered, "Those are roots." Bera challenged the loan. She made Leif explain repayment in front of every borrower. When he used the phrase customary service, she asked whether custom meant a debtor's child carrying nets for life. He struck the phrase and replaced it with shares, dates, and a ceiling. The tablet grew uglier and safer. Tovi measured the prow. He slid bone shims beneath the carved neck and marked movement with charcoal. The head had shifted during ice and again under cleansing heat. Any attacker who knew the joint could remove it faster than Torfi first believed. They added a temporary rope cradle before dark. Our watches overlapped. Astrid's fighters saw deck approaches. Harbor guards saw wells and sheds. Bjarni's repair hands heard changes through timber. No single watch covered everything. Their reports met at the mast every quarter bell, where Leif copied them without pretending he had observed each fact himself. The 5-cost shares caused the ugliest argument because everybody understood silver and nobody agreed what happened to a vote after silver was spent. A scalesman wanted Gullhaven to hold the marks until payment cleared. Bera said that gave the harbor votes aboard a ship it would never sail. Leif wanted the family to buy them back. Astrid called that a quiet increase in inherited command. Ragnhild scraped the tablet smooth and began again. The 5 were a non-voting reserve convertible once to the listed harbor work. When converted, they were extinguished. No carpenter, scalesman, harbor office, family block, or secret buyer retained their votes. The original accounting remained 100 shares so the payment could be audited, but continuing ownership after expenditure was 95. 10 trust shares also cast no vote until a proven living claimant received them. That left 85 living voting shares now, 25 family, 30 salvage, and 30 crew. The 3-share crew fund voted as one block only when at least 5 of the 9 original crew shareholders directed it, otherwise those 3 abstained, but the legal threshold did not shrink. More than half of the current eligible 85 meant 43 shares. Removing a voyage leader after an emergency required 43. Taking debt beyond the listed 5-share reserve required 43. If trust shares later passed to living holders, the eligible denominator and majority rose with them. Asa carved those numbers beside the clauses. Leif tested the rule. I control 25 family votes. Until Sten's fate changes the lawful controller, Ragnhild said, and my personal salvage and crew marks vote separately. As yours, yes, the family cannot order them. He looked at me. Then you cannot remove me by gathering 3 friends around the common fund. I would need a great many friends, I said. This seems poorly designed. Bera slapped the tablet with one finger. It is designed so debt cannot invent friends for you. Only then did all 9 accept the voting estate. A bolt from the dark struck Asa's iron tongs. The hook flew into the water. Lamps went out along the quarantine line. From beneath the quay came the scrape of boarding claws. The enemy began the fight. That mattered to the saga and to me. We had not hunted a people for renown. We had not manufactured danger by threatening a settlement. A specific armed band cut Gullhaven's lamps, wounded a watchman, and came over our rail for the Nidhogg prow. Merc boarders rose in 3 places at once. They wore seal dark mail with stone plates sewn over chest and thigh. Soot blackened their pale eyes against lamp glare. Their hooks were not Hroalds' corpse work. They were practical iron claws on green ropes built for cave ledges and ship rails. Short spears suited close decks. 2 carried jars that hissed when air touched the wax. Astrid's company had drilled the ground. Ingrid kicked the first hook loose before weight came on it. Ingjal loosed at a visible hand, not a shadow, and pinned glove to rail. Orm called 3 at stern and did not chase when one dropped back. Astrid held the narrow key plank with shield left-handed, turning the approach into one body at a time. A second group climbed from the waterside behind the prow. They had mapped our watches. One cut the red gag from Nidhogg's mouth. Another drove a wedge behind the carved head. They were not trying to take the ship. They were trying to remove the prow. "Prow team!" I shouted. Bjarni abandoned a fresh oarlock rather than protect his work while the ship was stolen piece by piece. He swung a shipwright's maul into the wedge, not the climber, and knocked it free. Bera poured hot cleansing brine onto the boarding rope. Colin dragged the wounded harbor watchman under a bench, choosing a stranger over a clean hiding place. I took a spear from the mast stack. No thunder. The deck was crowded with allies and examiners. Hammercast did not aim. A burst in darkness would make speed out of ignorance. A merc fighter came low at me behind a hooked shield. I jabbed, struck stone plate, and gave ground. He was shorter than I was, and stronger through the hips. His shield hook caught my spear shaft. Instead of contesting strength, I released, stepped on the trailing green rope, and pulled when he shifted. Speed helped my foot arrive. Bjarni's rail brace stopped my back. The fighter fell to one knee. I struck his weapon hand with a mallet and kicked the spear away. He rolled overboard before Astrid could capture him. At stern, Orm fought a woman with a white stripe across her soot mask. She cut his scalp bandage and could have opened the old burn. Anjal's sling drove her behind the steering post. Orm did not pursue. He planted his spear and held the root as contracted. Then a wax jar broke on deck. Grey smoke poured out, cold and heavy. It did not poison the lungs at once, it killed light. Flames shrank blue. Eyes watered. Rune sight tempted me to chase enchantment lines through the visible smoke. I knew better. Smoke and too many moving edges could turn true lines into a snare of confusion. I kept Odin shut. "Touch calls," Astrid shouted. Her company answered by name and place. "Ingrid, prow! Enjal, mast! Orm, stern." Bjarni made repair hands beat tools against planks so we knew where friendly bodies worked. Bera crawled to cover the water. Leaf rang the harbor bell rope from our stern, a mortal alarm no smoke could hide. Shore guards began answering. The boarders had planned for fear and isolation. They had not planned for separate commands that could function without seeing me. A dark shape crossed above. One of them had climbed the mast using a hook ladder. He dropped toward the prow with an iron saw. Jarl heard ropes strain and cast toward sound, but held because Colin shouted from below. That restraint saved Colin's skull. It also let the climber land. The climber drove the saw into the first map groove. The first minute stretched. Every object became uncertain in smoke. A mallet could be a raised axe, a rope, a snake, a friend, a low attacker. We used names and fixed places. Nobody struck merely because a shape moved. That discipline cost us speed and saved us from helping the enemy with our own fear. One jar rolled towards stores. Bera trapped it beneath an iron pot and sat on the lid with a wet hide between. Cold smoke leaked around her boots. She coughed, cursed, and refused to move until Solveig dragged the pot to an open scupper with a hook. The harbor watchman lived. Colin found the bolt had crossed flesh above the hip without opening the belly. He packed it and ordered 2 armed men to carry rather than fight. They obeyed the unarmed healer. Their absence weakened the line for a moment and preserved a life the attack had tried to spend. The assault had begun before the first lamp died. We learned that from the cuts afterward, but in the smoke we learned it by consequence. A thin line had been tied from the west bell shutter to the key ladder. When the watchman opened the shutter, he pulled a green loop from beneath the water and signaled all 3 climbing teams at once. Another cord lifted a slatted screen against the harbor fire, making the darkness look like failed oil instead of attack. Their first hooks carried padded teeth. They landed with less ring than bare iron. One cutter hung beneath the rail while a second climbed over his back. Ingrid kicked away the visible claw and missed the man already under it. He came up inside her reach, drove a shoulder into her belly, and reached for the prow cradle rather than her throat. She struck his ear with the shield boss and yelled, "Hooks have shadows!" That warning changed how we fought. Orm stabbed low under the rail before cutting rope. Bjarni laid a loose plank along the gunwale. Weight from any hidden climber tipped it. Solveig, already introduced as the cordmaker repairing our stays, recognized the moss-dyed ropes by feel. She found one leading beneath the stern and hacked it with a rigging knife. A submerged float popped up carrying 2 spare smoke jars. Bera caught one. The other broke against stone and blinded the shore path. The attackers used the smoke to separate workers from fighters. 2 cutters rattled the store's hatch while their true prow team crawled under the outer whale. A third struck Torfi's brace marks with chalk, copying them as he moved. They knew removal would fail if they split oak at the wrong grain. This was reconnaissance turned into a boarding plan, not a rush by hungry thieves. Leaf rang the bell until Scala cut its rope. After that he struck the steering oar against the stern in a slow double beat. Gullhaven answered on shield rims. Through smoke, shore and deck kept count without seeing one another. Orm screamed, not from a new wound but from the cold burn in his scalp. The 10 soot lines on the prow flared dull red. Something beneath the ship answered. The answer under the ship was a chain vibration, not a monster rising. It ran through the forward ribs and into Orm's old burn. He dropped his spear and clutched his head. The saw-wielder shouted in the Merc tongue. Half the boarders changed direction toward him. Their goal was confirmed by action. Free the carved map, retreat through water, leave everyone else bleeding. Ragnhild's guards reached the outer stones with lamps and bows. One drew on every soot-black face he could see. I shouted, "Only weapons, only boarders, there may be harbor merc among the sheds." Ragnhild repeated the order louder. Law became useful in battle because it named guilt narrowly enough for arrows to choose. Dalla Merc, the harbor iron trader who had interpreted the cleansing marks, stood behind the guard line, unarmed and furious. She translated the boarder's command. They say the lower route must reach Chaintaker before Thor. Their leader is Skalla Deepscar. These are her sworn cutters, not mine. That sentence prevented a massacre on shore. It also gave us an enemy name. Skalla was the white-striped woman at stern. She threw a hooked knife, cut the harbor bell rope, and vaulted the steering post. Leaf blocked with a spare oar. The knife bit wood. She twisted, pulled him close, and struck his chain wound with her forehead. He folded. She could have killed him. Instead, she kicked him aside and ran for the prow. Goal before slaughter. Dangerous did not mean mindless. Astrid intercepted. Shield met hooked knife. Skalla's stone-plated sleeve caught Astrid's spear point and turned it. Astrid used the miss, stepped inside, and drove her shield rim under Skalla's chin. Skalla bit the rim, trapped it with the hook, and both women fell against the rail. Astrid's wounded right arm failed when she tried to rise. Ingrid chose her captain over the prow. She abandoned the map line, crossed through smoke, and struck Skalla's knee. That let Astrid roll free. It also opened a path for the saw-wielder. Choices cost something even when they are right. The saw-wielder hacked through one forward binding peg. Torfi cried out as if cut himself. The carved head sagged a finger width. Water entered the loosened scarf. If they took the prow, they might leave us with a hole below spray line. I practiced the cast in my head because the deck offered no clean line. Spear balance, weighted cord. One turn, one step, release at the mast. The target was not a person's back, it was the iron saw wedged in visible oak. A miss left the prow loose or killed the climber. A thunder-charged miss could punch through our own hull. I did not activate yet. Instead I cast plain. The spear crossed smoke, clipped the saw handle, and knocked it from both hands. Not enough. The climber caught the shaft, snapped it against the rail, and drew a short axe. The saga gave no gift for almost. Practice had made the attempt possible. Power remained a choice with cost. A smaller merc boarder crawled from beneath the prow, helmet gone, blood on one cheek. Colin stood directly behind her with no weapon. She saw him. He saw her. Each froze. Skalla shouted an order from the rail. The smaller fighter looked toward the loose prow, then toward Colin. She shoved him down as an arrow crossed where his chest had been. The arrow came from Gullhaven, loosed at her. She could have used Colin as shield. Instead, she kicked his herb bag toward him and raised empty hands. Ve Anvil daughter, Dalla translated from shore when the fighter shouted. She yields to ship law. She says Skalla lied about killing healers. Her choice arrived in the middle of smoke and ruined every easy judgment. I dragged Ve and Colin behind the mast. Bound? Dalla stood in arrow light. Harbor bows could have mistaken her for a signaler. She kept both hands high and translated anyway. Each phrase exposed her to Skalla's anger and Gullhaven's suspicion. Ragnhild moved beside her, making the interpreter's protection public. Ve's surrender split the band. One boarder shouted coward. Another hesitated before striking Colin. Skalla answered with command, not argument. That showed allegiance cracking under the pressure of changed terms. We used the crack without pretending Ve had become harmless. Orm heard the map hum. The sound was not words. It was pressure through bone and scar, strongest at the lowest carved tooth. He could point toward pain, not explain it. Ve supplied mechanism later. Until then, we treated his reaction as evidence of danger, not prophecy. Dalla and Ve knew one another's factions by insult. Dalla called Skalla's cutters deep toll dogs, people who charged armed passage through tunnels they had not dug. Ve answered that surface traders sold iron twice and blamed the cave when both buyers met. Ragnhild ordered them to save the quarrel until nobody held an axe. They did not. Your trade hall marked this prow for Skadi, Ve shouted while Colin rapped her ribs. Dalla's face went still. One factor marked it. He vanished after spring melt. I gave Ragnhild his account. After he sold the chalk, after your cutters broke his son's fingers for the ledger. Their anger had history the rest of us did not own. More useful, it exposed a fourth approach. Dalla said Skalla would always leave a dry retreat for chalk and map skin. Ve said Skalla trusted water and would use submerged lines. Both were right. Beneath the eastern ladder, Bjarni found a corked leather tube tied to a swimmer's rope. It held copied watch marks and a sketch of the prow joint. The marks showed our blind quarter between Astrid's key guard and Orm's stern watch. Orm wanted to run after the hidden skiff. Astrid barred him with her shield. Your place is stern. They know the gap. Then close it. Do not become another gap. Ve asked for front bonds before giving more. Ragnhild promised only that surrender terms would be heard, not forgiven. Colin used a broad cloth around Ve's wrists so a pull would tighten against fabric rather than broken skin. She tested it herself, then pointed toward the lower tooth. Dalla translated every word, including Ve's accusation against her trade hall. That cost her standing among the harbor traders clustered behind the bows. One shouted that she was feeding an enemy. Dalla turned without lowering her hands. I am carrying speech. If your innocence needs silence, buy a priest, not an interpreter. Serdic pretended great interest in his bell. Ve spat blood and held out her wrists, then pointed urgently at the prow. Dalla shouted her words across water. Do not let the lower tooth break. It opens the map and wakes the root mark. She had surrendered. She had also chosen to help us stop her former leader. Neither erased that she boarded armed. Both mattered. The smoke thinned enough to show Scala at the prow with 3 cutters around her. One held Astrid off with a hooked shield. One drove a replacement wedge into Torfi's loosened scarf. The saw-wielder raised his short axe over the lower carved tooth Ve had named. On shore, archers lacked a clean line through our people. Bjarni and Ingrid were pinned behind fallen rigging. Injal had 1 heavy stone left. Orm knelt blind with chain pain. Leif was climbing up by the steering oar, blood running from his reopened neck. The target stood visible, the iron wedge behind the prow scarf. Break or drive it outward, and the carved head would settle back into Torfi's cradle. Strike the wood, and we might open the hull. Strike a person, and the wedge remained. I had practiced this cast in daylight. I had not practiced it in smoke with a wounded shoulder and friends moving across the line. No gift could make those facts kind. I hooked a fresh ash spear through the 3-arrow-weighted cord. 1 loop below the head, balance forward. The weapon was compatible because I knew spear and weighted line casting. A sword would not have been. A carpenter's maul would not have been. Thor could transfer 1 storm strength burst through this practiced throw if I paid 2 favor to unlock hammercast. I spent it. Thor favor fell from 3 to 1. Hammercast unlocked as a refinement of storm strength. Equipped gifts remained storm strength and rune sight. No swap, no third hand. The storm entered my back and thrown shoulder. Pain arrived before force. My heart hammered against bruised ribs. Heat rushed down my arm until fingers trembled around the shaft. I took 1 turn of the weighted cord. The deck rolled. Scala saw me and dragged the hooked shield toward the line. Astrid trapped its rim with her own and held it away despite her failing arm. Now, thrower, she said. Engel loosed his last stone. It struck the axe-wielder's wrist. The axe fell, but the wedgeman kept hammering. I stepped with the deck and released. Thor did not aim. My practice did. The spear flew point first, weighted cord humming behind. A border crossed the line after release. I could not call the weapon back. Leif struck that man's ankle with the spare oar and dropped him beneath the cast. The spearhead hit the iron wedge off-center. Thunder burst through wood and metal. The wedge shot outward, passed through Scala's cloak without touching flesh, and buried itself in a mooring post. The spear shattered. Force drove the prow back into its cradle. Torfi threw himself onto the binding rope, and Bjarni hauled with him. The loosened scarf closed enough to stop spray. The cost folded me. My throwing shoulder went numb from neck to fingers. Heartbeats came in pairs, then a pause long enough to frighten me. Heat became thirst so violent I tasted sand. I fell against the mast and could not stand. Hammercast had moved 1 burst into a practiced weapon. It had not made me strong afterward. It had not healed the thigh, ribs, wrist, or shoulder. A second activation might stop my heart, and I would not attempt it. Scala remained alive. So did most of her cutters. 1 refined throw had saved the prow, not won the boarding. Astrid won the next breath. She ordered her company to close around the forward bench, not chase enemies over rail. Ingrid hooked a green rope and wrapped it around the mast. Engel used his empty sling as a garrote on a weapon wrist, then released before killing a helpless foe. Orm forced himself upright and planted his spear crosswise as a barrier. Leif cut the boarder's retreat ladder from stern, leaving them 1 water route at the bow. Ragnhild saw the shape and ordered shore archers to aim at that route, not the whole deck. Bjarni rang tools against rail and drove repair hands forward behind a plank shield. Bera threw clean sand into the grey smoke, making moving legs visible. Colin bound Ve's cheek while Ve shouted warnings through Dalla. The release line narrowed. Astrid's shield edge, Leif's oar, and the moving border each crossed it. I waited through one possible cast and nearly lost the prow. Waiting was not cowardice. It was aim refusing to borrow an ally's body for a target. Thor wanted force entire. The gift pressed toward a broader surge through legs and chest. Hammercast required concentration into the practiced chain of foot, hip, back, shoulder, elbow, wrist, and shaft. Letting power spill might throw me with the spear or strike the mast through my own grip. After impact, sound vanished. For several breaths, I heard only pulse. My fingers opened without feeling. Plain sight returned in flashes. Torfi on the rope, Bjarni's teeth bared, Astrid's shield locked, Leif below the cast. The throw succeeded because all of them held their places. The clean lane lasted less than a heartbeat. Astrid made it by losing ground on purpose. She let the hooked shield shove her back, then turned her wounded side away and trapped its rim under the forward bench. Ingrid stepped over her captain, not beside her, forcing Skalla left. Injal's stone took the axe wrist at the instant the wedgeman raised his mallet. Leif saw the opening from stern. "Crossing!" he shouted. A cutter lunged into my release path. Leif could not reach the man's chest, so he swept the spare oar across both ankles. The cutter fell flat. My spear passed where his ribs had been. None of that belonged to Thunder. The hit drove iron outward, but it also kicked the carved head against its braces. Tovi heard the lower brace crack. He crawled beneath the forward bench while fighting continued over him and shoved a bone shim into the opening. Torfi threw a rope around the neck. Bjarni caught it with only 3 sound fingers, wrapped the bitter end around his forearm, and leaned until blood soaked his hand dressing. Solveig took the other end. Instead of hauling straight, she led it through the mast ring and made a purchase. "Pull on his count, not yours," she told 3 harbor workers who had boarded behind the guards. They obeyed Torfi's taps. The prow settled 1 tap at a time. My right arm hung as if somebody else's sleeve had been tied to me. I tried to close the hand. The smallest finger moved, then nothing. Colin put 2 fingers against my throat, swore, and made me lie on my left side. I could hear Astrid offering surrender beyond the pulse in my ears. "Can you do it again?" he asked. "No. Cannot or will not." My heart paused, fluttered, and struck twice. Both. He took the weighted cord away before courage could become a lie. Skalla understood first. "Back," Dalla translated. "Map lost. Back below." She had initiated the assault. Now we would make continued aggression impossible. Retreat can become slaughter if the victors stop thinking. Skalla's cutters backed toward the bow ladder in a tight half-ring. 2 were wounded. 1 dragged a leg. The axe wielder had a broken wrist. They still held weapons, and still protected Skalla. Astrid's company held the forward bench. Harbor arrows covered the water. We could press and lose people, or offer surrender and risk deceit. Astrid chose before I found breath. "Drop iron and take ship bonds. Keep iron and swim under arrows." Dalla translated. Vey shouted the same in the Merc tongue, adding something that made Skalla curse her by name. 1 cutter dropped a spear, another followed. The man with the broken wrist knelt. Skalla did not. She cut the retreat rope herself, seized a smoke jar, and threw it between our lines. Then she jumped over the prow into black water with 2 loyal cutters. Harbor archers loosed at armed shapes only. 1 cutter vanished under a hit. Skalla surfaced beyond the pale stones and caught a line from a hidden skiff. The 3rd escaped with her into darkness. We did not defeat Skalla herself. We broke her boarding assault, held ship and prow, captured 3 resisting members after surrender, and made the remaining attackers flee. The specific hostile band ceased being capable of continuing that attack. That met the saga's rule without pretending every enemy died. The deck settled into moans. Astrid remained on her feet until Ingrid said, "Captain, down." Then she sat hard. Her wounded right arm had reopened from shoulder to elbow. Not severed, not useless forever, but unfit for another shield bind. Ingrid had a cut across the brow. Injal's forearm wound had reopened and 2 fingers were sprained. Orm's scalp bled around old cold burns, and chain vibration left him dizzy. Leif's neck wound bled, and his left ankle swelled from the oar strike. Bjarni lost a thumbnail and split the skin beside his missing fingers. Colin had bruised ribs from Vey's shove, but no arrow hole. Bira had a smoke cough. Torfi's ear was cut. I could not lift my throwing arm, and my heart still stumbled. Among enemies, 1 cutter had drowned after the arrow. 2 had fled with Skalla. 3 surrendered wounded. Vey had surrendered independently before the final offer. No prisoner was executed. Harbor healers treated all under guard after Colin refused to rank blood by race. The saga burned through my exhaustion. Worthy hostile assault defeated through direct participation, shared command, lawful defense, and personal risk. Renown gained 12. Before the attack, Renown had stood at 0 of 12 towards Saga level 3. Renown now 12 of 12. Saga level 3 reached. Thor favor gained 2 for using practiced force to protect crew and harbor against an attacking chain band, not for helpless death. Thor favor rose from 1 after hammer cast purchase to 3. Odin favor remained 1. No Odin favor was spent. Choose one measure: might, speed, toughness. Might stood before me differently than it had on the ice. Not a promise that force solved law. Law had solved law. Contracts had built the line. Practice had aimed the cast. Allies had opened it. Might would make my ordinary body gradually stronger after the victory, useful when thunder was too costly or absent. I chose might. The change began as deep warmth along back and legs. Gradual adaptation, not healing. My shoulder remained numb. My thigh cut stayed open. My ribs hurt. Thirst remained. The measure would add some force over minutes and hours if I rested and ate. It could not refill blood, repair tendon, clear smoke from lungs, or make another cast safe. A new threshold appeared when level 3 settled. Renown, 0 of 16 towards Saga level 4. No less a captive, helpless execution, repair task, or claimed command would fill it. The next level required worthy hostile defeat under the same rules. I told the full state aloud while Asa marked battle testimony, Saga level 3. Toughness first, speed second, might third. Renown, 0 of 16. Thor, favor 3. Odin, favor 1. The 2 equipped channels remained rune sight and storm strength. Narrow focus and hammer cast remained their refinements. I had used rune sight once during cleansing and storm strength once, transferred through hammercast during the assault. No gift swap. Then I stopped speaking numbers because Astrid needed Colin and Vey was arguing with a guard who tried to tie her injured wrist behind her back. Front, she said in rough Norse. I yielded front. Bind front. Prisoners were searched. Asa found stone knives, green cord, cave chalk, and 1 chain token marked with Skadi's broken ring. She recorded each object beside its owner. Vey corrected the owner of a chalk packet, even though it helped the case against a loyalist. Truth remained hers to spend consistently. Colin triaged by bleeding. A merc cutter with a chest cut came before my shoulder. Astrid backed him. One harborman objected until Ragnhild asked whether law became cleaner when captives died waiting. He carried the bandage box after that. We counted no victory twice. The broken assault earned 1 award as a connected hostile action. Capturing surrendered cutters added nothing. Scala's escape added nothing. The drowned attacker was part of the same defeat, not a separate purse of renown. The 3 surrendered loyalists did not become 1 obedient bundle. The broken wrist man gave his knife hilt first and warned the others not to shame Scala. A woman with a thigh cut kept her spear until Vey named the hidden archers at the pale stones. The third tried to slide a stone blade under his tongue. Dalla saw his jaw move and told Ragnhild, who removed it without breaking teeth. Colin chose the chest wound first because the blood bubbled. A harbor healer argued that my shoulder carried storm injury and might kill me. Colin answered, then watch his breathing while I stop this hole. He used Ace's clean cloth on the cutter and Bearer's last boiled thread. I lay close enough to hear the captive ask why. Dalla translated Colin's answer. Because you stopped fighting before I treated you. Keep doing that. Ingrid made Astrid sit by placing both hands on her shoulders. Rank met weight and lost. Astrid tried to issue orders from the deck. Ingrid stuffed a folded bandage between her teeth while Colin closed the arm. The captain's glare could have soured milk. Vey refused a rear binding. She had yielded with hands visible and saved Colin before that. Ragnhild heard Scala's loyalists object, then ordered Vey seated apart with wrists in front and 1 guard from shore, 1 from ship. Vey asked for Dalla as interpreter. Dalla said she would serve the hearing, not the prisoner. Asa spread the captured objects on a sail scrap. Chalk packets, chain token, 3 stone knives, green cord, a wax jar that had not broken, and the corked reconnaissance tube each received an owner's name or an open question. No one was rewarded for a body. No one turned Scala's escape into a second victory. The deck smelled of vinegar, smoke, blood, and wet rope. It looked nothing like glory, and exactly like the end of an assault. Ragnhild considered, then ordered front bonds and a separate seat from Scala's captured loyalists. A prisoner was still a person capable of terms. Dawn found us around the Nidhogg, carving with soot on our faces and law witnesses at our backs. The final cleansing fire had heated the prow before the assault. Hammercast had driven it into Torfi's cradle. Smoke and spray now filled grooves that had once looked like scales. 10 long lines ran from the carved mouth to 10 different points along neck and breast. Each ended in a broken ring. Plain eyes could see them. Nobody needed rune sight, and I would not spend another memory to make visible evidence feel more important. Orm knelt beside the carving. His cold-burned scalp pulsed whenever his finger neared one line. Hroalds' magic had marked him while he was chained near the stern. That did not give him secret knowledge for free. It gave pain and fragments he had heard while captive. Hroalds spoke place sounds when he touched the prow, Orm said. I thought he was counting drowned men. He said Stonewomb, Ashbarrow, Split Harbor, Saltmouth, 10 names. The cold moved to a different line each time. Vey sat with front-bound wrists and Colin's bandage across her cheek. Ragnhild asked whether she would testify. Vey asked what testimony brought. Nothing automatic, the Reeve said. Truth may alter charge. It will not erase armed boarding. Then truth belongs to me still, Vey answered. I choose price. She demanded protection from Scala's captured loyalists, healer treatment, no handover to chain, take as buyers, and a chance to contract passage after judgment if Gullhaven would not let her remain. She did not demand release without consequence. Ragnhild agreed to hear and decide publicly. Vey explained that merc cutters had carried pieces of an underground route map for generations. Not all served one Jarl. Skadi Chain Taker had purchased, threatened, and stolen maps, claiming he meant to reinforce ancient bonds. Scala learned the Nidhogg Prow was a master index carved by Hroald from 10 site routes. Each broken ring marked a chain site already damaged or targeted. The lowest tooth opened a sliding key that aligned root grooves by tide. Why save Colin? I asked. Vey looked offended. Healer carried no iron. Scala said no useless killing. Then Arrow came, and she ordered me use him as cover. A leader who changes law when afraid has no law. Why tell us the map? Because Scala will bring it to Chaintaker if she returns. Because my mother's tunnel lies beside Stonewomb. Because broken chains crush Merc halls before your sky halls hear thunder. Because I want passage north. Choose the answer your songs can hold. All of them could be true. Dalla verified route signs from Merc trade tablets. Orm supplied Hroald's spoken names independently. Asa copied the 10 visible lines. Torfi found the sliding tooth and opened it only after braces supported the prow. A thin bone strip emerged from a groove etched with tide marks and 10 broken circles. No hidden prophecy spoke. Evidence accumulated from carving, mechanism, remembered speech, and 2 people with different knowledge. The first aligned line pointed east of Gullhaven to a low coast marked by an ash tree above a mound. Orm knew the sound Hroald had used, ash barrow. Vey's face changed. Dead court. Ragnhild asked what that meant. A barrow people trade with by leaving salt and names. Scala's buyers passed there 6 nights ago. They said the dead took living pledges because a storm-marked thrower broke Hroald. Every eye came to me. Did they name him? Astrid asked. Torfi traced construction. The root grooves had been cut before Hroald's later decorations. Soot settled differently in old cuts and fresh scratches. Scala's chalk marks aligned with the sliding tooth, confirming prior inspection without revealing how her spies entered. Dalla challenged Vey. She asked 3 root words in separate dialects and reversed the order later. Vey corrected one answer and admitted another was unknown. The admission made the known signs stronger than perfect confidence would have. Orm repeated Hroald's sounds. He did it away from Vey first. Asa wrote them by ear. Only then did Vey hear and match 6 to Merc roots, dispute 2, and leave 2 uncertain. Independent memory and map craft met without becoming identical stories. We tested the map like people who expected it to lie. Torfi shaded the grooves from dawn light. Old cuts held soot deep at the bottom. The saw scar showed bright fibers and curled across 2 roots without following either. Asa pressed damp cloth into each line and lifted 10 separate black trails. The carving was not one crack seen 10 ways. The sliding tooth fought us. Torfi loosened its pin, but the bone strip moved only a thumb. Ve warned him not to pull. Dalla called that convenient fear. Ve asked for a cup. With bound hands she dripped water along 3 tide marks. The strip swelled, bowed, and freed itself from a side notch. Had Torfi pulled, it would have snapped at the first circle. You could have said wood swells, Dalla muttered. You could have known, Ve said. They nearly began their faction quarrel again. Orm stopped them by vomiting over the rail when the lowest groove hummed. Colin moved him back. We tied a cord to his wrist and had him point without touching. 6 times he matched Hroalds' remembered sounds to the same lines. Twice he admitted the pain spread and could not choose. Asa marked those 2, uncertain. Dalla then asked root words in harbour. Murk, deep road speech, and the clipped trade cant used at Salt Mouth. Ve knew 6, one she corrected after seeing the tide strip. One she refused because the name belonged to a hall that killed strangers who spoke it. 2 remained blank. Gaps stayed gaps. The corked tube from beneath the ladder supplied Scala's sketch. Its charcoal arcs matched the tooth mechanism and 3 of the 10 grooves. That proved her band had studied the joint before boarding. It did not prove her interpretation of every destination. We ended with 10 physical routes, 6 strong place matches, 2 disputed sounds, and 2 names unknown. Ashbarrow was strong, Ashtree cut, Mound sign east tide, and Orm's repeated sound agreed. Evidence, not certainty, gave us a direction. Ve nodded. Eirik Halvorsen. The name could not command us yet. We still had a tainted ship, unpaid provisions, unfinished rail, prisoners, and no lawful departure. Doom could wait while we finished the work under our hands. We completed the death taint burning before allowing the Barrow News to command us. Asa's list held 23 copper hooks, 9 hair cords, black wax scraped from 11 seams, 3 false pitch caps, the rotten throne planks, 4 eye-scratched shields, 1 red gag, and bilge rags that no washing saved. We burned all of it in the iron trough beyond high tide. The missing 5th shield had gone to the Skerry. Ragnhild marked that openly rather than pretending a complete count. Gullhaven sent a boat to recover it if tide returned it. Law could acknowledge an uncertainty without turning it into a curse. Hot brine and vinegar washed the open seams. Surdik rang his bell and spoke his right. Bera added juniper because it killed smell, whether gods listened or not. Dalla burned cave resin at Ve's request for the merc dead harmed by chaincraft. Nobody claimed one custom-owned cleanliness. Smoke rolled through bilge, benches, sail, and forward compartment until our eyes streamed. The Nidhogg prow remained as structural timber, warning, and evidence. Asa cut a clean witness notch beside each of the 10 map lines. Ragnhild ordered a bronze quarantine plate fixed under the neck. Death taint burned at Gullhaven under named witnesses. No sign of living plague. Prow retained by law for chain inquiry. Anyone seeing it later could fear if they chose, but they could also read what had been done. At midday, the reeve struck Hroalds' ship from the plague-dead roll. Water crossed the stones in barrels. Bera received each one like a suspicious queen. She checked seals, tasted, made harbor hands rinse the tar-tasting barrel, then filled it. Opening departure stores became exact. 4 sound water barrels, 12 full skins for ship use, hard bread and dried fish totaling 130 person days, 2 barley sacks, onions, salt, herb stock, lamp oil, firewood, vinegar, spare clean cloth, and 1 mercy skin kept sealed. The count allowed 10 days for 9 original crew, 3 willing additions, and 1 merc guide if judgment permitted. If fewer sailed, the margin grew. If delay past 2 days, Bera would recount. Repairs continued under Torfi. Both sprung strakes were pegged and corked. 4 scarf joints held. 7 oarlocks had fresh pins. The broken rail received new oak instead of corpse shields. Sail seams were restitched and the yard patch sisted with a second length. The steering grip was replaced. The prow scarf had a new iron strap and 2 oak braces after the assault. The starboard seam no longer wept under harbor swell. Torfi warned that hard ice, a broadside grounding, or another thunder strike through the prow could reopen everything. Repaired did not mean invulnerable. Payment was witnessed. Sten's first armoring paid cleansing, quarantine labor, initial carpentry, and water. The 5 non-voting cost shares converted once to silver value, paid oak, iron, sail work, and harbor fee, and were extinguished. Nobody bought or retained their votes. Leaf's second ring purchased provisions and remaining repair labor as a fixed loan against 5 family shares if not repaid from lawful voyage income by spring. No body, marriage, or lifetime service stood as collateral. Astrid's night contract earned repair iron and 2 barley sacks for her company, which she contributed to common stores in exchange for written credit, not praise. Ragnhild recognized the share tablet in Gullhaven's harbor roll. Family claim 25. Salvage 30 as individually listed. Crew shares 30, 3 to each of 9 people and 3 common. Absent heir trust 10. Cost reserve 5. Now spent, extinguished, and recorded without votes. The living holders voted to rename the ship once the old name burned. Hroalds' ship died in Us's fire as words on black wax. Leaf proposed Seaworm, which nobody liked. Bjarni proposed Soundhull, which was a prayer disguised as a name. Bera proposed Full Barrel and received more support than dignity should allow. Astrid looked at the new iron strap across the carved map and said, Stormbreaker. The burn took hours. Hooks glowed, cords curled, and black wax ran into sand. Nothing dramatic climbed from the flame. That absence mattered. Cleansing was labor under witnesses, not spectacle invented to flatter us. Torfi tested under load. 6 people hauled the forward line while Tovi watched the new scarf marks. Bjarni backed water with 2 oars. Leaf turned against the mooring spring. No charcoal line shifted beyond a nail width. Torfi approved coastal sailing and forbade ice ramming as if I had proposed it. Ussa read the payment aloud. Every good an hour had a mark. Bera challenged a duplicate vinegar charge and won. Torfi added an unlisted iron strap and lost. Gullhaven's fee remained. Public accounts embarrassed everyone equally and therefore served us. Tovi would not approve the prow because 6 people could pull it once. He drew charcoal lines across iron strap, scarf, and brace, then had us load the forward stay in 3 directions. On the side pull, 1 line opened the width of a barley husk. Torfi called it acceptable movement. Tovi called it the beginning of a split. Master and apprentice knelt nose to nose over the mark while the rest of us held strain. Tovi finally drove a thin oak key beneath the inner brace and asked for the load again. The line stayed closed. Torfi inspected it, grunted, and added the key to the bill under Toby's name. At the oarlocks, Bjarni found the 7th pin binding. He could have worn it smooth at sea. Instead, he made Solveig and Ingrid back water against the mooring while he listened. The pin squealed, heated, and shaved bright iron into the socket. Torfi knocked it out, filed the shoulder, and reset it. Bjarni tested once more. This time the blade moved without chatter. Solveig climbed to the sistered yard with new line around her waist. She rejected 2 knots tied by harbor boys, not because they would open at rest, but because both put the joining tails where sail rub would eat them. She turned each knot away from cloth, then hung her whole weight from the sister. The yard bowed and returned. Bera's part had no height, and frightened her more. She rolled each filled barrel across a bed of wedges while the ship rocked on its springs. 1 broke free and struck the next cask hard enough to dent a stave. She rearranged all 4, 2 forward, 2 aft, no pair touching. The 12 skins went at separate stations. A spear should have to work for thirst, she said. The harbor workers had reasons beyond wages. Tovi wanted his repair to outlive Torfi's name. Solveig wanted a berth north. 2 oar pin boys had brothers on fishing boats and did not want a cursed wreck loose in their channel. They stayed until the tests passed because our hull would share their sea. The vote carried. Stormbreaker belonged to no single living man. That made her ours more honestly than conquest alone could have done. A ship can be lawfully shared and still remain tied because too few willing hands choose her. 9 had survived the ice. Eirik, Astrid, Leif, Bjarni, Orm, Bera, Colin, Ingrid, and Nijal. All 9 retained shares whether they sailed or stayed. Service required a new yes. Bjarni said yes after inspecting every repair twice. Bera said yes after moving the onions away from lamp oil and threatening anyone who reversed her work. Colin said yes on healer's terms, authority to quarantine wounds, 1 locked herb chest, and freedom to leave at a safe harbor. Ingrid and Jarl renewed their names under Astrid's shield company. Orm read the contract again with his scalp wrapped, then pressed his mark beside theirs. Leif said yes as steering master, not owner of crew. Astrid signed captain until the company's promised vote. I signed voyage leader removable under the share rule. 8 yeses followed mine. Nobody was trapped by gratitude, debt, birth, or a closed harbor. 3 Gullhaven people asked passage and work. Solveig rope. Hand was a widowed cordmaker with forearms like anchor roots. She wanted freight share and passage north to recover a sister from Ashbarrow's coast. Tovey O'Knee was Torfey's apprentice, a quiet young carpenter who had spent the assault hugging the prow brace while arrows crossed. He wanted one voyage wage and authority to stop the ship for structural danger. Dalla Merc wanted passage only as far as the Merc Roadfork, payment for translation, and no place in Astrid's fighter company. Adjoining mattered after the assault, she would not let Sculler define Merc dealings with the ship. Ragnhild checked each contract. Solveig joined deck crew and rigging. Tovey joined as carpenter. Dalla joined as interpreter and free passenger under workshare. That made 12 willing people aboard for departure, not 12 owned souls. Vey's case remained. Armed boarding, damage, and conspiracy carried a debt. Saving Colin, surrendering before defeat, warning about the lower tooth, and testifying against Scala mitigated it. Ragnhild sentenced her to compensate Stormbreaker through 6 weeks of paid work, with half her wage going to repair debt and half held for her. She could refuse passage and work in Gullhaven under guard instead. She chose passage north as a contracted guide, front bonded only until outside harbor, with a hearing at the next lawful shore. She did not join the crew share pool yet and did not swear loyalty to me. I guide because my mother is near Stonewomb, she said. I oppose Scala because she broke terms. I do not become your tame cave crow. Good, I said. We already have too many birds interested in me. One white-eyed raven landed on the bellpost as if insulted. Odin offered no message. I gave him no memory. The captured loyalists chose Gullhaven custody rather than passage. Their wounds were treated. Scala remained at large with at least one surviving cutter and knowledge that Stormbreaker held the map. Ragnhild sent warnings to Merc trade halls naming Scala's band specifically. No collective punishment followed. Dalla dictated the wording. Our enemy ledger was no comfort. Scala Deep Scar escaped. Chain takers buyers had passed Ash Barrow. 1 cutter drowned, 1 likely escaped with Scala, 3 remained in harbor custody, and Vey traveled by chosen sentence. The Frostwalker remained north. Hroald was dead, but 10 broken chain sites spread across the prow. Our injury ledger was equally plain without becoming a funeral chant. Astrid could command but not hold a hard shield bind with her right arm. I could not throw hard until shoulder feeling returned and Colin approved. Orm risked collapse if chain vibration struck again. Leaf limped. Injal taped 2 fingers. Bjarni's split hand needed dry wrapping. Bera's cough eased in clean air. Ingrid's brow took 4 stitches. Colin's ribs bruised. Solveig, Tovey, and Dalla began unwounded. Each yes had conditions. Solveig refused fighter duty. Tovey refused orders that concealed hull danger. Dalla refused translation of torture threats. Colin refused execution work. Bera refused execution work. We accepted because willingness without boundaries is only desperation. Vey considered shore work. Gullhaven offered a guarded forge berth instead of passage. She asked about winter prejudice, wages, and whether Scala could reach her. Ragnhild answered without promises she could not keep. Vey chose the dangerous ship for reasons she named herself. Rest changed the deck. People slept in turns of 2 full bells. Food arrived warm. Wounds were washed with enough water. No measure erased fatigue, but sleep returned judgment by degrees. We postponed departure rather than turning urgency into another god. Solveig asked what happened if battle began while she was aloft. Astrid said every able hand defended the ship. Solveig said that answer turned rope work into fighter service by another name. They rewrote it. She would cut grapples, manage sail, carry messages, and defend herself, but no captain could place her in shield formation without a separate yes. Her freight share paid deck labor, not blood hire. Tovey wanted the right to stop sailing for a sound no one else believed. Leaf objected that one frightened carpenter could miss a tide. Tovey set Torfey's faulty oarlock pin on the tablet and asked how much tide a seized blade bought. They settled on an immediate call to shorten sail and inspect. If Tovey could not show a physical sign within a quarter bell, steering command resumed. Concealing a sign from owners ended his contract with full wages owed. Dalla's terms took longest. She was a free passenger, not deck crew, and not Astrid's shield hand. Translation and route work paid her passage and meals as a work share. She might volunteer for other tasks without changing status. She refused torture speech, false surrender calls, and any order to present Merc custom as one law shared by every faction. If I tell Vey that all Merc halls demand blood for debt, I make your ignorance into a weapon, she said. Vey listened from the guarded bench. Gullhaven offered her 6 paid weeks at a forge, half wages held against damage, the same as the ship sentence. She asked whether Scala's traders used that forge and whether guards would protect sleep as well as work. Ragnhild admitted she could not promise safety after winter ships arrived. Passage brought danger too, but it moved Vey towards Stone Womb and her mother. She chose it after an hour alone with both contracts. That distinction survived the count. 9 original survivors renewed. Solveig and Tovi joined the working crew. Dalla traveled freely under her interpreter's workshare. Those 12 were willing travelers. Vey, paid and sentenced as guide with another hearing promised, made 13 people aboard. Calling all 13 crew would have made 3 different kinds of consent disappear. We delayed one tide for rest because progress does not replace sleep. At the next flood, the quarantine chain opened. Stormbreaker crossed Gullhaven's pale stones under her own new name. No scratched eyes watched from the rail. Fresh oak shone where corpse shields had patched gaps. The sail carried visible stitches, not hidden perfection. An iron strap braced Nidhogg's neck beneath the bronze cleansing plate. 10 map lines remained dark in the carving. We kept them because warning can be more useful than beauty. Bera's 4 water barrels were wedged apart so one blow could not split all. 12 skins hung by watch stations. Food, barley, onions, herbs, oil, firewood, repair oak, tar, wool, pins, line, sailcloth, tools, and the sealed mercy skin each had a marked place. The second arm ring's debt tablet stayed in Leif's chest beside Sten's seal. Share copies rested with Leif, Bera, Ragnhild, and Asa. If one burned, ownership did not become whatever the strongest survivor remembered. Bjarni called the oar count. Leif took the steering oar. Solveig handled forward line and judged my casting knot before trusting it. Tovi crouched by the repaired scarf listening for changes. Dalla stood where shore and ship could see her separate banner pin. Vey sat unbound at the forward bench under agreed watch, her own knife sealed in Bera's chest until the next hearing. Astrid placed Ingrid at prow, Engel at mast, Orm at stern, then sat where she could command all 3 without pretending her arm had healed. Colin checked raps. Bera checked Colin. I stood beside the mast with no thunder in use and no rune fire in my eyes. The final state was simple enough to say once. Saga level 3. Measures chosen in order. Toughness, speed, might. Renown 0 of 16 toward level 4. Thor Faber 3 after spending 2 to unlock Hammercast and earning 2 for breaking the assault. Odin. Faber 1. Equipped gifts, still storm strength and rune sight. Refinements. Narrow focus and Hammercast. 1 rune sight activation had exposed a visible taint hook and cost the sound of my father's laugh. 1 storm strength activation had traveled through a practiced weighted spear cast, saved the prow, and left heart strain, thirst, tremor, and an unusable shoulder. Neither gift solved harbor law. No swap occurred. Ragnhild raised her staff from the key. Death taint burned, shares recognized, debts witnessed, crew willing. Gullhaven releases Stormbreaker. Leif answered, Stormbreaker departs under divided ownership and contracted hands. He said it without shame. The sail climbed. Fresh stitching took wind. The steering grip held. Water ran clean along the repaired starboard seam. 12 willing travelers and 1 contracted prisoner guide moved with the hull, while 3 hostile captives remained under lawful care ashore. Nobody knelt. The death taint was burned. Ownership had settled without blood between claimants. Repairs and provisions were paid, and the shares stood in a public roll. Astrid's company sailed under its own contract. Every willing traveler had been shown a door and chosen the deck. The harbor watched differently. Some still made ward signs at the prow, others waved to Colin or Dalla. Fear had not vanished because a tablet changed. It had been given evidence, limits, and time. That was enough to open water. Leif tested the first turn. He used little sail and let the tide take the stern. Bjarni called 2 short strokes. The repaired hull answered without grinding. Tovi kept one hand on the scarf and nodded only after the outer stone passed. Astrid's banner was small. Ingrid tied a plain grey strip beneath the yard, marked with 4 white shield strokes. It was not my banner or Leif's. Wind opened it beside Stormbreaker's new name, proof that one deck could carry more than one chosen bond. The first turn exposed a repair we had not meant to test. Leaf set little sail and asked for 2 port strokes. The new steering grip answered, but the forward spring line refused to run. Pitch from the cleansing fire had stiffened one loop. Solveig saw it draw tight around Tovi's ankle. She cut the line rather than save it. The severed end whipped across the rail and took a strip from Bjarni's sleeve. Stormbreaker drifted toward the outer pale stone with no forward check. Leaf ordered 1 short backstroke to starboard. Bjarni repeated it. Ingrid's blade caught clean, mine stayed shipped because my right arm could not lift. The bow slid past stone by less than a spear length. Solveig looked at the ruined line. "Charge that to me if you like," Bera answered from the casks. "I charge you 1 ankle kept." Tovi did not nod at the prow scarf until open swell replaced key slap. He had 1 palm on the iron strap and the other over the charcoal line. No change showed. Bjarni tested each repinned oarlock with a half stroke. The 7th, troublesome at birth, ran quiet. On shore, the 2 oar-pin boys shouted when the repaired rail cleared the stones. The bucket woman who had argued for our water held up an empty cup. Dalla answered her from beside the mast, raising the copper earring Gullhaven knew. Some traders turned away. Others watched her leave under her own feet. Astrid had Ingrid tie the grey company strip only after harbour law released us. 4 white shield strokes opened in the wind below the yard. Leaf studied it, then ordered the sail eased so it would not foul. Separate authority had become an ordinary rigging concern. That pleased me more than a kneeling deck ever could. We crossed the line with 12 willing travellers, and Vey under her paid sentence. Behind us, 3 loyalist captives remained in treatment and custody. Ahead, every repair still had a breaking point, every contract an exit, and every person a reason that belonged to them. Only then did Asa's harbour boat pull alongside with the first clean copy of the prow map. She passed it up in a waxed tube. "A runner came from Ash Barrow while you loaded," she said. "He died at the gate, not plague, knife wound." He carried this tied beneath his tongue. Inside lay a strip of birch bark marked with the same first line as Nidhogg's lowest eastern groove. Beneath it, words had been cut with a blade rather than inked. Orm read the place sign. Dalla read the Merc route mark. Vey went still. Leaf sounded out the Norse words because my hands had begun shaking again. The dead of Ash Barrow held 11 living hostages below the mound. They demanded no silver, cattle, ship, or priest. They demanded the storm-marked thrower who killed Hroald and broke the Scout of Chain Ice. They demanded Eirik Halvorsen by name. At the bottom, 1 final line had been pressed so deep it split the bark. "Come before the 3rd sunset, or the living will be taught to stay dead." Behind us, Gullhaven's bell rang departure. Ahead, the coast bent toward a mound under an ash tree. The first of 10 broken chain lines had chosen our course. My throwing arm would not rise. I ordered Leaf to hold the eastern wind.